First question, where did the idea for Ready Player One come from? It came from my love of video games and my love of Roald Dahl stories. I grew up loving the Willy Wonka books and James and the Giant Peach. And I think one day I had the idea of what if Willy Wonka had been a video game designer instead of a candy maker, and what if he held his golden ticket contest inside his greatest video game creation, and that video game could be kind of the coolest futuristic video game possible, a virtual world that could contain all of pop culture and mash it all up together, and the whole idea kind of grew out of that. How far away are we from living in the Oasis? Well, I think some people already are living in the Oasis through Facebook and Twitter and social media and the internet and video games. There are already people who are kind of addicted to escaping into a fantasy world, and that's been the case, and a concern for people since the invention of books. People used to worry about people getting lost in books and then getting lost in television and movies and video games. But now, for me, when I was writing Ready Player One, the Oasis was always meant to serve as an allegory for the internet and the way that we use the internet now, and the way the internet landscape is populated with all the different facets of pop culture, and whatever you're interested in, you can kind of go out on the internet and connect with other people who are interested in that as well. Combined with, massively multiplayer online games like EverQuest and World of Warcraft, games that people log into and then control an avatar and assume another identity and lead a whole separate life, and for some people, that's already addictive. Some people already find World of Warcraft more appealing than the real world, but as video games become more photorealistic and immersive and virtual and wrap around your senses, I think they'll be even harder to put down or to escape and more addictive. Not that I think video games are bad. For me, it's all about striking a balance between fantasy and reality. Well, I did no research for Ready Player One about the pop culture references. Those all were woven into the story just as they occurred to me. I didn't make a list of things I wanted to shoehorn into the story. I tried to include them organically, the way that you would in a conversation with your friends, and they'll say something that makes you think of a Monty Python reference or a line of dialogue from The Simpsons. So I tried to, that's how I tried to weave the pop culture into the story, except for, when I was working it into the challenges, which was a more elaborate process. But the most research that I did was about virtual reality technology. That required a lot of study, and I found that the only people at the time working on virtual reality were NASA, and the military, both because they wanted to train astronauts and policemen to do their jobs in a consequence-free environment, where if they were training them, then they might, get killed. But virtual reality was a good training ground. But since then, right around the time that Ready Player One got published was when the Oculus company was founded, and the first commercially available virtual reality headsets, came out just a few years after Ready Player One. So it's happening much more quickly than I predicted. Whose idea was it to have Will Wheaton read the audiobook? That was my idea. They actually asked me if I wanted to read the audiobook, which I knew would not be a good decision. All my favorite audiobooks are read by an actor who brings the story to life and performs all the characters, and from the very beginning, I knew Will would be the perfect choice. He and I are exactly the same age. I think we were born about a month apart in 1972, and I'd kind of been internet friends with Will. He had helped, spread my spoken word MP3s way back in the 90s, and so I was kind of returning the favor by mentioning him as the president of the Oasis. He's a character in the story as well, so I put him as a character in the story, and then when it came time to do the audiobook, I thought, Will would be the perfect person to read it. He had done some of my friend John Scalzi's audiobooks and just done an amazing job, so he read my second novel too. Every book I ever read, probably I would want Will to read the audiobook, and he's got a cameo in the movie too, so keep your eyes open. What's it like to have Stephen Spielberg direct the film adaptation, considering a lot of his characters are in the book? People always say that. There are not a lot of Stephen's characters in the book, or a lot of direct references to Steven Spielberg. He has mentioned, kind of in passing, 3 times, As someone says, I don't care if Steven Spielberg directed it when they're arguing about Lady Hawk. But the only actually direct reference to his films in the story that is a plot point is Wade using a Grail diary to collect all his clues for the Easter egg hunt, which comes from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So that was really the only thing that we lost. And there are plenty of other Steven Spielberg references in the story, like the T-Rex or the DeLorean from Back to the Future, which he helped produce. There are some gremlins hidden in there. So there are plenty of Steven Spielberg references, but anyone who's wanting more, I try to remind them that this whole movie is a Steven Spielberg reference, and a Steven Spielberg movie that will be referenced, until the end of time. So it's a little too meta to need more Steven Spielberg references in our Steven Spielberg movie, but hopefully people understand that. What are some of your favorite books? Wow, that's like asking me my favorite movies. The books that played a big role in inspiring Ready Player One, other than the 2 Wonka books by Roald Dahl, also James and the Giant Peach was a big book for me when I was a kid. The reason that Wade has to go live with his mean aunt, Alice, in the stacks is because James, whose parents die on the opening page of the book, getting eaten by a rhinoceros, he has to go live with his evil Aunt Spiker and Aunt Sponge, and they are terrible to him. But then, something happens that carries him off on a fantastic adventure, just like Wade. In James' case, it's a giant peach, but different for in Ready Player One. Some other books that were a big influence on me: Neuromancer by William Gibson, in which he coined the term cyberspace. Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, in which he kind of created the idea of the metaverse and expanded on William Gibson's creation of cyberspace and made it more in tune with my vision of what virtual reality would be. So those were some of the giants on whose shoulders I was standing when I was writing Ready Player One. Do you have a favorite book to movie adaptation? Jaws. Let me say something else about do you have a favorite book to movie adaptation? It would probably be Jaws, and partly because it deviates so largely from the source material. The film Jaws, one of the first blockbusters and one of the greatest movies of all time, captures the spirit of the book but makes considerable changes to the source material, and different characters do different things and things happen in a different order, and that happens in every great book to film adaptation. Like the Lord of the Rings is another Lord of the Rings trilogy that Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens managed to create is, I think, one of the best and most faithful adaptations of one of the greatest books of the 20th century. Han Solo clearly shot first. That footage was doctored. Favorite film of the 80s? Back to the Future, we'll say. Favorite artist? I love those Nagel paintings. But I think my favorite band from the 80s, or just in general, right now it's Joan Jett, because she came and played our after party in Austin and just blew the roof off. So I'm back in love with Joan Jett right now. Favorite computer game of all time? Probably Dungeons of Daggerath on the TRS-80, which plays a big role in the novel of Ready Player One. Star Wars. I love Star Trek, but Wars. I'm not that good at Joust. Everybody wants to play me at Joust and they kick my ass. I'm good at writing about video games, not necessarily playing them. Real life, especially right now. My real life is kicking ass. I have no interest in virtual reality at the moment. Steven Spielberg, there's a couple directors in that movie, but Steven, plays the clerk at Cook County office and with a mustache, and he just kills it. Read the book first. If you watch the film first, then you're going to imagine all the actors and you won't be able to get the movie out of your head. It's better to have the story play out in your mind's eye, and then you get your mind movie version first, which is always going to end up being different than the film adaptation. So you should enjoy your own version of the movie and then enjoy Steven Spielberg's version.